Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for everyone who took time out of your schedule to join us on the event today. We do appreciate it. It's great to have you. I see everyone out there in the audience saying hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are across the United States and around the world. A lot of great shout outs on the webinar today. Brandon, Charles, Patricia, Jerry, Satyam, George, Deb, Rakesh, Jim, and so many more. Thank you to everyone for joining us. We do appreciate your support. The topic of the event today is not what it seems, understanding the anatomy of an attack. This event is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Pure Storage. And we've got a couple of awesome presenters lined up for you today. I think you may have seen at least one, if not both of them, on our events before, and they always give a fantastic presentation. Now, before I introduce you to our expert panelists, there's a few things that you should know about today's event. First off, I should mention, my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm serving as the host today. We always want our events here to be educational. We encourage your questions in the questions pane of your audience console. This is a technical topic, the anatomy of an attack, talking about SIEM systems, and we do encourage your questions. I'm sure you will have questions on your mind. We have our best question prize as well to help maybe shake some of those questions loose. If you're not quite sure if you should ask, I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But if you haven't used the questions pane yet, it is right there next to the handouts tab of your audience console. Feel free to say hello. But of course, we also, and more importantly, perhaps want your technical questions on the topic at hand. Speaking of hands, we have handouts, our resources. Sorry, a silly pun there. We have handouts, a number of resources in the handouts tab. I encourage you to check out. Most importantly, the first one there selected by Pure Storage is the IDC Spotlight, how to improve enterprise SIEM operations with the right storage. So make sure that you check out that resource. We will also be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card at the end of the event today. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing would have already occurred because it's a recording, but hopefully you're here on the live event. You do need to meet the Actual Tech Media Prize terms and conditions that you can find right there in the handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize. This is for an additional $50 Amazon gift card. We will review the questions after the event and contact the prize winner then. You must still meet the Actual Tech Media Prize terms and conditions. What this means is that you do need to ask a question to be entered into the best question prize drawing. So keep that in mind. All right, and with that housekeeping information out of the way, I'm excited now to welcome today's two expert presenters. Welcome to, first, our friend, Mr. Andrew Miller, Principal Technologist at Pure Storage, and another special guest today, Mr. Seth Kindly, Principal Data Architect at Pure Storage. Andrew and Seth, it's always great to have you on. Take it away.
Thanks so much for joining us for Not What It Seems, Understanding the Anatomy of an Attack. My name is Andrew Miller. I'm joined today by Seth Kindly. Seth, always so great to see you. I appreciate it.
Fancy seeing you here. Thank you, Andrew. Great to be on again.
I mean, we didn't coordinate on matching hats, but maybe we can do that next time. I don't know. So.
We got matching vests, or almost.
Yeah. So, and actually, I meant to mention that. So, Andrew Miller, Principal Technologist, maybe more importantly, from a little bit of an introduction standpoint, this might be my actual tech vest because I think I've done a couple actual tech events in the last couple months and actually greatly appreciate everything the actual tech team has done. Congrats again on this being the 10th anniversary. Potentially, more importantly for today, though, a Principal Technologist, Office of the CTO here at Pure. Started as a customer for about 7 years, admin to engineer to architect. You'll hear some of that and kind of what we go through a little bit today, some time on the partner side, some time building out a technical marketing team. For better or worse, I've been talking about this topic, ransomware, cybersecurity, way too much for the last 5 or 6 years. You put Andrew Miller ransomware into Google, you'll find stuff that I think is still mostly true. If you find anything that you think isn't true, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. But it's because this topic just does not seem to go away. And as an industry, we're still wrestling with how to deal with it and help our customers. So we're here to talk about today. But before I dive in, Seth, do you mind introducing yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I'm one of the principal data architects on the unstructured side. Just like Andrew, I spent a number of years being on the other side of the keyboard, which is something was bad and now it's time to fix it. So Andrew and I have done a couple of these where we've got a unique take. So I've been with Pure about 6 years, cover the public sector, specifically civilian, and with a security focus. I get to be the guy that has all those memorandums and statutes memorized. So super exciting stuff.
So what I'm hearing is that we all, actually, I'll go stay there for a minute. We all do acronyms, but you do acronyms even more, and it's your curse and your pride and all that at the same time, So
exactly, it's the only thing I'm actually fluent in. Not even English, just acronyms.
Good for you. Good for you. I feel like we'll both fit in, and I'm hoping for audience too. You might actually identify with that a little bit. So what we wanted to do today is a little bit of kind of a two-part section, if you will, almost. Is first going through anatomy and attack. I'm going to chat a little bit more for this, and then and I'll be tossing to Seth periodically because we worked together for a little while. And then I'm going to turn it over, kind of the primary talking stick over to Seth as far as looking at the SIEM part of this specifically. So kind of two different lenses on the same topic. The goal here is not to start with, and not even really focus on what's all the Pure stuff, but actually to hopefully make this more educational for you. You understand more what's going on in the landscape. Hopefully we want you to see where Pure fits in here, but some principles and some ideas, and maybe some stories that you can use up the org chart into your board or your executives to help them understand how challenging this threat is. Okay, so first, anatomy and attack for the first little bit here. Where I always like to start here is not necessarily with the encryption phase of the attack, but as we're starting with day 0. And what I've often seen in the past is I used to spend more time talking about how attackers would get into organizations. And ironically, we're going to focus in part of that as a SIEM standpoint. But right now, there's almost sometimes more of it used to be an if versus when. Now we know that this is potentially more likely to happen. We need to do things to block it, but it's really hard to make sure it won't happen at all. That is why we focus on SIEM, because we want it to be very, very low. Story though. So when I was presenting on this in Toronto a couple years back, a gentleman came up to me and said he'd received an email from the day before. Actually, I was presenting on ransomware as a topic, and it looked like it was from iTunes. And the only thing in there that wasn't correct, it was for a $49.99 app. Which, if hopefully that's not make or break money for any of us. I don't think it is for you, Seth. But assuming you've got the hat, so. But still, it's like what did my wife or my kids or me accidentally buy, or spouse? The only thing wrong in the email was to dispute this purchase link, and you have to look and view source in the HTML to see that, right, kind of thing. From there's the idea that attackers, once they get in, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they would go and kick off the encryption phase of the attack right away. Now, not so much. There's the idea of dwell time or gestation period. They get in, they're doing even what I even used to do sometimes when I was helping do consulting to help customers move data centers, like I helped Chiquita. They've now been bought out, so I can say this, move from Cincinnati to Charlotte, right? You're looking for all the application dependencies, and there's that server over there in the corner, and what does it do? Ooh, we unplugged it. It does things that really matter. So they're actually going through, attackers, over a long period of time, trying to figure out how to get access into potentially the holy grail, which is first having domain level admin credentials, because then there's a little bit of maybe all bets are off. And then even more, what we've been seeing is what they'll go and try and do is have credentials as well to the methods of data protection to remove those, because it makes sense. Attackers are saying, if you have really good backups or data protection or other things, you can use those and not need to pay the ransom, right? So again, we're going to keep pulling the kind of the SIEM and the logging and analytics lens on this. In this section, logging and analytics is absolutely critical because they're looking around. If you have better ability to track this stuff in real time, that's the only difference between logging and analytics, and maybe the amount of delay. You might be able to prevent something sooner. But we all know that not every attack gets stopped, right? Or else we wouldn't have this discussion. There's the point when the data is encrypted. And actually, I want to pause here, Seth, before I keep going into kind of the encryption and incident response phase. Anything that you want to make, anything that you'd like to highlight here?
No, I think you've done a great summary so far. The biggest thing is that this is not, as you put it, right? We have to put SIEM in the spotlight. We have to put an ecosystem together to see this, because attacks have gotten very dynamic, and we're going to talk about advanced persistent threats later, and those are constantly evolving. So this is not something that can stay stagnant, right? To Andrew's point, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe it would have been instantaneous, right? After the breach. Now there's this gestation or dwell period. Well, just like people dwell longer to get more information, threats change. They are advanced, they are persistent, and things change just as quickly as we close one door, 5 more windows have been opened. So, stay dynamic, stay hungry, stay aggressive. Otherwise, you'll find out the hard way.
It can be a little tiring, but this is a little bit of being in IT technology in general. It's time for saying the only thing that doesn't change is change, right? Kind of thing. We know it, and sometimes we realize it more some days than others. Okay, and actually that reminded me of one other story I wanted to toss in. So shortly before the data is encrypted, there was a large actually security company that went somewhat public with this. I'm going to leave the name out because they were more public inside internal security circles. They got hit by the SolarWinds supply chain attack. Several years ago, SolarWinds announced that their systems have been compromised. Not only that, but the software, the agents that their customers were installing. So this customer, the first thing they saw that indicated the encryption phase of the attack was really kicking off was an account executive. All due respect to my sales peers that I've worked with over the years, kind of thing, but an account executive logging into a Windows Active Directory domain controller. There's no world in which that should ever happen. And frankly, I don't think either for you or me, Seth, this far in our lives, we've been hands-on, we've been on the other side of the keyboard, but we shouldn't be logging into Active Directory domain controllers, right? That's not what we do anymore. So they were able to see that thanks to really solid and almost in real time analytics logging on behavior that was very much outside of the normal. Okay, so the day data is encrypted. This sometimes I'll call the point of encryption, right? So the point of infiltration, dwell time, gestation period, point of encryption. When that starts, there's also the idea here of breakout time. I didn't put this on the slide. You can go Google on it, maybe later, hopefully, or if you're listening to us, you can pause this and come back and listen. But the idea of breakout time is from when the attacker starts the encryption phase of the attack to when you're able to stop that. You're able to find, because you'll figure that out pretty quickly because your phone's ringing, like applications are down or offline, that kind of thing. But if the sooner that you can stop that, those minutes or maybe hour average breakout time can be 30, 60, 120 minutes. Those are insanely precious minutes because they're trying to encrypt in mass across a large part of your organization. So if they're kicking this off with great automated tools that you might even use like PowerShell, the sooner you can stop that, even at every single minute you can stop that, diminish that breakout time window, super valuable. Next, we are now, for better or worse, potentially into recovery mode, or what's referred to as incident response, capital I, capital R. There are literally companies, consulting companies, you may have partners that do this, that actually specialize in this. I know many customers that have incident response consulting firms on retainer, because this is always something of a human-driven operation, right? We need technology to accelerate, but if there's intelligent people trying to do bad things in our organization, there has to be intelligence on the other end to unpuzzle that, right? We can automate up to a certain degree, and then especially performance helps that automation. But in the incident response phase, we're now going in and we want to bring the data back to right before the point of encryption. We need our data unencrypted in an offline environment. That's where it's a little bit different than disaster recovery. There's no just push the button, bring it online, because out of the incident response team, they're figuring out by looking at the logs, again, how did the attacker get in and what all did they get access to? Right? Because that's where it becomes critical. So it's both, there's an application here in this phase, there's an application later. The performance matters dramatically and how fast you can respond. As well, there's even, sometimes I'll even put in the piece, and this is now a little bit of a freebie side note, every now and then I'll get folks who, maybe at a board level, like we don't want to pay the ransom, but we think we might not have a choice. The challenge is even if the attackers are honest and they give you the tools back, like give you the data back, the decryption tools are usually slow enough. There's one great, very public story where they paid the ransom and then they used the same data recovery methods. They just decided were too slow. It's because decryption is computationally intensive and it takes actually, I'll give it a CPU and otherwise kind of thing. I think with that, Seth, this is what I wanted to walk through. I've got one more kind of section, but let me toss it back to you before we jump off the anatomy of an attack here.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it cannot be made clear enough that the mean time to detection, right? We love acronyms, MTTD, and mean time to resolution or response, MTTR. Those are things like Andrew said, when seconds count, you don't want to take minutes. If minutes count, you certainly don't want to take hours, right? So recognizing the anomalous behavior, that's one of the biggest things. And having real-time analytics platforms, a SIEM that is looking for that anomalous behavior. That's one of the things that we have to bring in, right? Logs are one thing, logs are great, but you're not going to get user information out of it. You need to have a means of looking at user behavior that's anomalous. And Andrew put that in the story, in the anecdote, right? That sales counterparts are great. They should never be getting on a DC. They should never be attempting to run netdom query FSMO to see, you know, what the schema master is. These are things that raise that flag. But the other problem is, if you don't have good analytics with this, you're going to get alert fatigue. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But hundreds of thousands of telemetric points and alerts makes people say, right click, mark as red, right? Select all.
Auto file role. Yeah.
Right. I will put this in a special location. I don't want to pay attention. So even if you have all the right tools, you have to have the right person. And I think, Andrew, you said that if you've got intelligent actors acting intelligently outside to break in, you have to have those intelligent actors paying attention on the inside to know when the flag has truly raised, right? So alert fatigue, false flags, those are things that lead to that MTTR being awful. Also, if you don't have to decrypt, if you can preempt this through a better technological suite, that Andrew has spent lots of time talking about. Like he said, go and Google his name and it'll actually come up. But if you don't have to decrypt and you can do this better, work smarter, not harder. Automation is key.
Thinking about the unnamed account executive, I'm sure they were logging in a perfect world to do a DC promo and add another domain controller and make things a little bit more resilient. So those are deep down old tech jokes. So yeah. Last piece here, and this actually highlights a little bit off the alert fatigue you mentioned, Seth. And sometimes I've referred to this in the past as the barking chihuahua syndrome. You know, it's just like, dun, 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 dun. And I love dogs, by the way, so I'm not knocking on chihuahuas or any kind of dog here, but just it won't stop, and then you get start a little bit tuned out, or maybe the boy or girl or person who cries wolf right too many times. So there's the idea here of, from an attack standpoint, we look at this, and we're not going to spend as much time here as I sometimes do, but this is a whole industry, literally. They even have call centers and help desks and actually helping you when you're going to pay the ransom and decrypt things. This is a maturing industry that competes with you, with me, with us, right? And this is where we get to the idea of even kind of asymmetric warfare, if you will. We can go a little bit of like go read the Art of War, that we have to be right as people, as an industry, every single time. The attackers only have to be right once. That's really hard. And that's why even, so I've been trying to be candid. There's good value in things we can provide here, as we'll get to as we go along. But we're also not preaching that there's a silver bullet, especially often on the networking side. There's things that can be shut down automatically, but we have to be ready with defense in depth. What do you know? You're wondering where that come in, because it's real. It's an all hands on deck. We don't want to be back at our last line of defense every single day. We want to be working on each of the lines of defense, and Pure can help along the way. So for the rest of this, I think we're finishing up kind of my section here. Think of it from a lens of a before, during, and after an attack. So if we kind of keep this from a SIEM standpoint, before, Pure offering capabilities that are simple to implement and operate. That goes to some core Pure simplicity. That actually can apply to protecting the primary data too. We're not going to focus on that as much today. During an attack, knowing that even, heaven forbid, if someone actually compromises admin credentials on maybe primary systems that have Pure systems that have Pure data on it, that's not a vulnerability. Like, does someone get an admin name and password? We've seen cases where attackers pushed a keylogger to a storage admin's machine. That's like, how do you protect against that kind of thing? So we have the ability to say that we can take checkpoints, points in time that are immutable, fancy word for read-only, as well as can't be removed faster than a timer, an eradication timer. That, by the way, is not just a thing that applies to primary data or application data. It could also apply to SIEM data. The attackers may very rationally be saying, I'm going to go try and compromise the logging and analytics infrastructure because that'll make it more likely I'll get paid a ransom. So that's another threat vector. Last but not least, today this will focus on probably the least from a restore standpoint. Pure has some unmatched capabilities around speed of restore and restore iteration, whether that's metadata heavy operations coming back from snapshots, or even crazy throughput that you can drive off of FlashBlade. Yes, I did just say a couple of product names. That's what they accomplish. Where I want to bring it home, though, is through all of this, before, after, even during, SIEM capabilities are critical both to prevent attacks, to help figure out what the attackers got into and did, so you can remediate an attack that's maybe during, as well as even during after an attack, to be able to, go and look back and reduce attacks later, and being able to protect that SIEM data in ways that are relatively unique, even in a very advanced threat scenario where attackers have gotten way deeper than we would like them to in our infrastructure. Before I turn it over to you, Seth, and jump to the next slide, anything else you want to add?
No, I think we're going to cover sort of how the sausage is made in the next section, right? You've talked about everything that we need to know so far. And now we've got all of the things that are important that you may not necessarily think about, right? So the role of security analytics, your SIEM of choice, right? Splunk is a big one. You've got Elk. We've got some homegrown ones. We've got some up and comers. There's a persistent need for secure operations, and we've touched on it, right? This is obviously it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's lots of competition. There are people that do it differently, better, right? There's a lot to keep in mind. So how do you distill it down to the things that are most important? That's usually the thing I try and focus on, Andrew, is just, okay, this is a very scary space, right? We are talking about resume generating events. We're talking about being held personally culpable, depending on what sort of information has been exposed. If it were HIPAA information, for instance, it's not you, it's, I was going to say, it's not your company. It's you as the admin that let this happen, right? That's something that's terrifying. So how do you distill it down and keep it focused, keep it simple? Well, we look at these sort of verticals. We need real-time threat detection. To do that, we have to have a number of telemetric points. How do we know where a threat's coming from unless we're logging everything? How do we know what real time is if we have an infrastructure that doesn't allow for response in, milliseconds or even centiseconds? A person is about, a centisecond, blink of an eye, okay, I can see what's going on. But if you're waiting seconds or minutes or tens of minutes, is that any good? Non-rhetorically, the answer is no, right? It needs to be real time. And then there needs to be a response. There needs to be a time to that response. So if we find it in 30 seconds, we need to have a response at the 32nd second, right? 2 seconds later, you need to be doing something. You can't do that 24/7, 365. You have to automate. There has to be something. And if this, then that trigger, right? We can't be on all the time. I was going to say, despite what people think, security admins do have lives. They enjoy soccer, football, drinking a beer, being with their family. They're not paying attention 24/7, 365. So it has to be automated. And that automation logic has to be sound, right? And we talked about alert fatigue. We have to reduce the number of false flags or the crying wolf, right? Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Yeah, it's falling all the time. If you look through firewall logs, if you look at the number of people that are poking around, it is 100% every second of every day, all year, depending on your industry, right? That made it sound really scary. It's not that scary, but it is kind of scary.
Serious.
And then finally, you have to collaborate with trusted advisors, people that do this, right? We're going to talk about it in a bit, but there's some groups out there that are, they look at those APTs, they trend them, they give you the analysis. It's Googleable. It's something where you can go from a larger pool of information to make your decisions. Okay. And then once we've gotten that and we know real time that it's detected, how do you analyze it? And what can you glean from that analysis? This is a perpetual learning curve, right? Attack vectors are numerous. Attack types are also numerous, but they share common threads, right? This is not an unbounded metaverse where you can do everything in 4-dimension. We know somewhat what's going to take place, right? Maybe it's a phishing scheme, like Andrew said, and you actually have to go and look at the source. Or if you've got a Mac, you just hover over it and you say, wait a minute, that's not the App Store. UncleRico.com is not the App Store. I shouldn't click that, right? So you're going to do the analysis. You're going to look at those advanced threats and get information out of it. And then when it comes to people, right? So not all of this is automated. Not all of this is machine. Sometimes there are people that are acting anomalous. That could be a sales rep trying to log into a domain controller. That could be somebody who typically doesn't spend 7 hours on YouTube, for instance, but has now started spending 7 hours on YouTube during their shift. And maybe they're looking for a way out, or maybe that's something that is worth looking into because of it being anomalous. And once again, in intelligence, threat intel, okay? Malicious actors acting maliciously, people acting oddly. What can I get from that? We don't know unless you go through a large database of all the possible permutational combinatorics. If I've seen it once, okay, that's nothing. If I've seen it 100,000 times, or I can query 1 trillion entries and look for the prevalence and say, hey, the last time we had somebody do this, they ended up quitting. The last time we had somebody do this, they ended up trying to delete files internally. We know that it's anomalous, and maybe we'll reach out. And then finally, all of the advanced analytics, right? We've talked about automation, we've talked about data sources, we've talked about really building and filling a pipeline, right? We have all these fingerprints, telemetry points, threat intelligence, and logs. What does it all mean, Andrew? Like, what do you do with it? As a human, you could spend your entire life working on it and probably not even scratch the surface. No exaggeration. So we need to get machine learning involved to say, okay, this was something very unique. I'm going to go ahead and learn from this. I mean, not to personify it. We are talking about personification of machine, but hey, that's all right. What we want it to do is review and then make informed decisions that are better, that are learning, that are pervasive, to keep people from having to act, right? And then finally, we've said this before, but we love acronyms. UEBA, User Entity Behavior Analytics, right? That's the people piece of it. We want to see what those people are doing, make sure that they're healthy, make sure that they're happy, and move on. So those are a number of things on this slide that sort of take this web and give you pillars, right? Real-time threat detection, analysis, intelligence, analysis. It's so important we said it twice. Andrew, you want to go ahead and move forward one?
I love, by the way, that I think that was a Napoleon Dynamite joke worked in there for Uncle Rico. I was never cool enough to go buy a vote for Pedro shirt,
right?
But so I love that, and also just the sense of why this is its own category that has some unique requirements. I mean, the amount of data and the velocity of the data, pulling it back to even the gravity of the data, like these are hard challenges. We're kind of familiar with these kind of challenges, but there's some unique twists to them.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that. Data gravity is real. The force of gravity is real. As these logs, they're massive in their own, they're just constantly proliferating and getting larger. So you have to have a system that can scale and can maintain that performance at scale. And we talked about the type of threats. We've said it before, right? But here it is on a screen. If you only, TLDR, want to remember one thing, Andrew Miller, ransomware, right?
Oh, no. Seth Kennedy ransomware.
Yeah. But advanced persistent threats, right? That's what we alluded to before, where these are essentially orchestrated threats with actors that may span multiple sort of disciplines. They may span multiple geographic locations. There is no geofencing with this. And they're often a consolidated effort, right? So these happen all the time. Sometimes they're led by states, by states in the world, meaning not like states in the country, but they're very dynamic and they're very scary, right? So like I said before, there are locations that you can Google that will give you the intelligence. They will tell you what's going on here. And you can use that to further refine your own sort of response. And we all know phishing, right? Andrew alluded to that earlier. Hey, why did you buy this app? I don't remember buying that app. It's caused me to have that reaction where I don't remember doing this, but I'm scared that I did. And now I should act without thinking, right? These are the things. It's subterfuge. You want to get people scared and then they'll react, right? That's a human element. Or like Andrew said, you want to dwell within the network or adjacent to the network long enough to gather all of the information you need to execute. And that may be so protracted and so long, such a long duration that good administrators and good SIEM and good logging doesn't even notice it, right? I mean, Andrew, we've heard tell of ones where ultimately the execution was after 1,095 days of dwell, 3-year orchestrated effort for 30 seconds. And that's really we have to be on and we have to be accurate every day, all day. So having a good system in place is what allows you to do that.
And I think as well, there's the interesting, and you have it highlighted there about insider threats. There's sometimes a sense here about, I'll talk about an insider threat or even a rogue admin, if you will. Hopefully that's not anyone listening to the call. We're not insulting our audience. That can actually look very similar sometimes to a compromised admin. So we actually have to think about that too. Not making up the story earlier of a hospital where they compromised domain admin credentials. They pushed that, they got then into the help desk, which they used to push a keylogger to the storage admin's machine. So there's sometimes this analog between thinking about insider threats as well as compromised admins, and where that fits in both from a SIEM standpoint and even from a protection of the logging and the recovery data. That's why I was mentioning safe mode a little bit earlier, because it can help there.
Yeah. So go ahead and move forward one, and we'll show you what this somewhat looks like real quick. So just to summarize this, right? This is one of those we're telling you, and then we're going to tell you again, and we have to tell you what we told you because it's that important and it's that varied. These are what the logs look like on the right. It's not exactly human readable, right? There's no ls minus lh on this where it comes out, spits it out nicely. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of these daily, right? So that could be your files, that could be applications, that could be sensors, literal or figurative, right? If you're in the industry, if you know what sensor means, right? Virtual machines, of course, clouds of all flavors, right? On-prem, off-prem, hybrid, all the different vendors. What do we look at? What do we keep looking at? Network events, firewalls, operating systems. All of these things have to be categorized and then can only be normalized if you have a good baseline. So establishing a good baseline, having a SIEM that is capable of aggregating all of this into one space where that data, that huge amount of data, is referenceable real time, no matter what it is, that's key. Having disparate silos of excellence, right? Where the firewall logs go to one thing, and then maybe you don't even have an IDP, but having these silos of data does nothing for your mean time to response, your mean time to resolution. It also doesn't help with detection. So you want to have a system that's capable of ingesting all of it, and then someplace to store it with these advanced features that we were talking about, the analytics, the speed, all of that sort of stuff. So Andrew, let's bring it home with the data requirements, and then hopefully we've got some Q&A in front of us. So the data requirements, right? Thematically, again, if you only take a few things away from this, real-time processing is key. Consistent search performance on your hottest data and your coldest data, right? That's also key. That's why Splunk and SmartStore, for instance, is so interesting, because we have this perpetual warm or this tepid forever, whatever you think is a better description, where your warm, what used to be warm, cold, frozen, glacial, forgive the pun, but all of the performance, all the data comes back at the same speed other than your hottest data, right? So you can set up these SLAs internally to meet your mean time to resolution. Rapid data ingest. Data has to come in as quickly as it's being generated. If there's a lag, you're going to miss something, period. Agile pipeline for data in motion. You have to be able to shift, forgive the pun, it needs to be agile. That's why it's described as such. You like that one, Andrew?
I did. I was thinking about Redshift and if I should make some jokes there, or even games that I played as a kid. So, love it.
And then all of this data we've talked about, it has to be within context. You have to know what is normal. So we have to have established a baseline. And to get anything from historical context begs the assumption that you're going to keep the data around, whether that be by memorandum or statute. We need to have things to build context. So I need to go back sometimes 3, 7, 10 years to see if the behavior is the same. Maybe it isn't. or maybe it is. But if I have a data set for the last 30 minutes, I don't know. That's no good. Everything should be efficient. As we know now, right? Data centers, it's harder and harder to build them. There's ESG requirements. There are a number of things. That's why people have gone to the cloud. They've gone to co-location, let power be somebody else's issue. You need to have efficiency at scale. Efficiency at scale is key. Non-disruptive operations in your SIEM and the underlying infrastructure, that's key. And then finally, simplicity. We've said it before. This is scary and it's hard and there's a lot to do it. If you're battling with the systems that are in place to keep them up, you're going to miss what you should be staring at, which is the security landscape. Pick a system that you can rely on. Pick partnerships that you can rely on. The Kinney Group, we're going to get into that in a bit. They know Splunk backwards and forwards, right? Don't go it alone. Don't go it alone.
And I want to highlight here, and hopefully this isn't pushing too far, but we've chosen, by the way, we're just about to the end for everyone watching here. Thanks for staying with us so far, kind of thing, is that from a pure standpoint, we do have platforms. We do have products that fulfill these capabilities. More out of almost respectful, actual tech as a platform, and for you all decided not to make this. Let's talk about all the flash array things and all the FlashBlade things. But these are the challenges, the design criteria, if you will, that we've had in mind as we built some of these products. Now, in some cases, they're more multi-purpose. They can actually handle lots of different forms of unstructured data thanks to concurrency and parallelism and great metadata capabilities and high throughput. But fundamentally, whether you're able to look at pure or not, these are the principles that you would want to think about as you're looking at a log analytics data platform. And if you're wrestling with some of these or don't feel like you're getting the answers that you want as you're looking at your systems of choice today, we can definitely help there. I think with that, Seth, we're over to Q&A. Is there anything else you want to toss in before I jump over and take a look at the questions?
No, let's see what we got.
Though I'm going to do one bonus item for anyone who is listening. If you were guessing that this was a web server, you can see the HTTP codes there and CSS. You win the prize of knowing that you were right. Sorry, there's no other official prizes today, but just in case that makes you feel good. Okay, into Q&A. Had a couple come in here. They're a little bit all over the place, which is fun. That makes it fun. So let's actually, I'm going to be a little bit specific here to start off. So you mentioned Splunk right at the very end. Obviously, that's one of the products in this category.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of combine two questions into one, if that's all right. So does Pure Storage support multi-site Splunk environments? And also, does Pure Storage's subscription-based model fit with Splunk? So I'll let you wander around that however you like.
Yeah. Oh, so the good news is that two-part questions, both parts are yes. So absolutely. So with Evergreen 1, you can do all of the sort of supports to all the applications, and you can bring that cloud-like experience to your on-prem Splunk deployment, right? So that's biggest and best option there. And then secondarily, after years of co-engineering, so I always love the fact that Alan Kay, famous computer scientist, said that people that are really serious about software should design their own hardware and vice versa. So we took that approach with Splunk and we co-designed Smart Store being on Pure. And after about 2 years of working through it with everybody, now you can have multi-site, call it a stretched cluster, call it geo-federation, call it what you will, with FlashBlade and Smart Store. And then there's this very cool industry first that we came up with in our S3 stack on that, which is called CVO, consistent version order, so that you know that object in primary site and object in secondary site are going to be kept in order. You don't have to do any extensible metadata or reshuffling, because we talked about simplicity, we talked about scalability. So yes, multiple sites with consistent version ordering, and yes, Evergreen 1 as a service. So there you go.
I don't think you're supposed to define the acronyms that nicely. You're supposed to leave people wondering, like, what's CVO? No, you define it twice. Look at
that. I defined it because that one has not become ubiquitous yet. Since we did it, right, we sort of got to coin the acronym, and it's one where there are too many in Google, right, where it could be all manner of stuff. So
yeah, sure.
That's why I defined that one.
True. I mean, TLDR at this point, people know where it's the top Google hit, but so.
Yeah.
Okay. Next. And actually, those were kind of two questions. I put them together into one. Thank you for the questions. Hopefully, you know who you are who asked. You don't mind that I did that.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I can get the next one because it looks like it's going to be, frankly, more up your alley with your subject matter expertise.
Yeah.
So when we mentioned incident response, how is SIEM used during that?
So this is going back in, and I won't change slides here, but if you were listening along, and I assume you were, because that's why I asked, the anatomy of attack, you get to the kind of the post-encryption phase of the attack. We hopefully aren't there all the time, but at that point, we're going into instant response mode, capital I, capital R. So it's about how do we figure out how the attackers got in and what all they got access to. What we're using for that is, let's start simple, syslog data, looking at log data on local machines, but really in aggregate, this is what we're talking about from a SIEM platform. And even more importantly, it's a lot of the characteristics that you hit on, Seth. We've got to hopefully be logging almost everything because we don't know what we're going to need to log until it's too late to have decided to already log it, right? As well as that then drives logging everything, creates some of its own challenges, right? That we need platforms that can handle that velocity of data and the data gravity. But then that when we go to analyze that we can get fast enough responses back to figure out all the way back to where we started, how the attackers got in, then follow what all they got access to, because that's then what we feed the teams that are actually doing the recovery to say, hey, you're recovering an offline environment, look for these binaries, look for this malware, this rootkit, these credentials need to change. That's a critical input piece as part of the recovery process. And having a robust SIEM platform is critical to the incident response, which is then what drives you into hopefully as fast as possible recovery.
I was going to say our MTTR, right?
Yes. Meantime to resolution, resolve, detection.
Right.
Well, detection earlier. My bad.
So there's a follow-on to that, and it's sort of that same theme, which is we know that having a solvent SIEM is really important, but can you use your SIEM to detect and automatically fix things? Can you have it do a sort of an if this then that? Like, can I use it? I hate to say it, and I won't say it because I think you will, but is SIEM like the end all be all?
So this is where actually I almost want to make some cheap jokes, because all my jokes are on that range of price point, but this is a hard space. So if there were automatic answers, I mean, we wouldn't be here doing this. I wouldn't have been talking about it for years. You wouldn't be talking about it for years. So there's absolutely value that a SIEM platform can bring, especially in sometimes tie-in maybe from a network standpoint about, these are dynamic firewall rules or next generation stuff there. However, there's not a sense of, I could have it go and say, see things and then automatically recover or roll back at a data level. That's a different thing than shutting down network flows or external, penetration from the internet in kind of thing. So there is a sense there's some piece there that's true. Every now and then we have, let's be real, some of our competitors like, just do this and it's easy and I'll figure it out. Well, if that's possible, we wouldn't even have the attacks happening in the first place at all. So this is very much a defense in depth. There's a nature here, especially as we look more at the network side of kind of self-driving security. But there's also an aspect where we need rapidly informed intelligence with humans to act on it, because automated pieces would actually potentially create more mess than they actually solve for. Anything else you want to add?
So I'm hearing that the easy button doesn't exist, but there are pieces that can be easier if you lay your foundation appropriately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or even sometimes just possible. Like it's like, I now know that I wish I had done that before.
Right. I can shun the port automatically, but I need to have a person look at it when the CEO calls and says, that was me.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
don't see anything else that came across. So
let's put it into a little bit of wrap up mode. So for folks that are listening that would like to learn more, you're like, man, I just started listening for like 40 minutes. There's more. Well, yeah, these are pretty deep topics. So there's a whole section on Pure's website, purestorage.com/ransomware. As well, there's an IDC Spotlight report. If you just go to purestorage.com and search on IDC Spotlight, that's all you need to do for it to come up as the top hit that actually goes. And of course, this is an independent view of enterprise SIEM operations with the right storage, and how that you can improve SIEM operations with the right storage. I think Kinney Group, you already mentioned that. That's a little near and dear to your heart, Seth.
Yeah, I did mention that one because if you're in the SIEM space and you've spent some time with Splunk, you know that the Kinney Group is sort of their go-to PS and the great prognosticator of all things Splunk. And we did actually, you can see it there. We did a study. There's a PDF white paper out there where you can go and see, in their words, what makes Pure so great with SmartStore, with Splunk in general, and get some best practice tips and tricks from the people that do this every day. So yeah, it's a good read. And if you don't believe us, you can hear it from them.
Kinney, IDC, more industry folks out there too. I think with that, we're at the home stretch. Pure Storage, the tagline is uncomplicate data storage forever. And in some ways, aspirationally, that's so you can be able to focus on all the things up the stack, not focus on the storage, but focus on the data, kind of thing. And this is a data-rich topic. Seth, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
With that, we'll call it a wrap and turn it back over to the Actual Tech team. Thank you, as always, for all the time. Have a great day, and I hope this was educational. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you would like to learn more.
Great presentation, great discussion. Thank you so much, Andrew and Seth. I really learned a lot from that. We had a lot of great questions from the audience as well. Excellent session today. I hope everyone will check out the handouts tab. I encourage you to do so. It's the IDC Spotlight, information on how to improve enterprise SIEM operations with the right storage. And then before we go, I should go ahead and announce the winner of today's Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to Sherry Cherry from Mississippi. Congratulations to Sherry from Mississippi. We'll reach out to you. We'll also reach out to our best question prize winner after the event. I hope that everyone learned a lot on the event today. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.